morning, everyone. I'm Max Ufberg. I'm a senior editor at Fast Company, and we are here today to talk about one of the most pressing and complex issues of our time, I would say, how children interact with technology. I'm joined today by our three panelists, Lauren Antonoff from Life 360, Tom Ballhatchet from Yoto, and Jennifer Betka from Yondr. And I'm going to quickly just let everybody say just a sentence or two about what you guys do. And we can start with you, Lauren.
Okay, I'm Lauren Antonoff from Life 360. We're like the family super app, helping families live better lives. We help families stay safe and connected with features like location sharing, safe drive reports, and crash detection with emergency response.
Hi, I'm Tom Ballhatchet. I'm VP Creative User Experience and Innovation at Yoto. We're a kids tech brand and an audio platform. We make this speaker, which works with physical cards. So you stick the card in the top, and then it plays. Oh, that worked all right.
Yeah, that worked pretty well. Wow.
And we're trying to put kids in control of their listening and learning and education. Yeah, nice to be here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Betka. I recently joined Yondr as their Chief Marketing Officer. Yondr's work is rooted in creating phone-free spaces for anyone, anywhere that is looking to create genuine connection, focus, and to enable creativity to flourish. And judging by what I'm experiencing now, the idea of a distraction-free environment sounds really nice.
Jennifer, can we get everybody to put their phones in a bag?
I think it's a moment to think about just the idea of like anticipating something important's about to come, so the phone goes away.
I like that. Well, to kick off, and we could start with you, Jennifer, but obviously everybody jump in. I'm curious about the choices you've made in your own sort of personal life. Like, how have you reconsidered the ways your own family interacts with technology and screens?
So my career journey started in the Web 1.0 era, and so for that reason, I understand technology from where it's come to where we are today. And so before I even joined Yondr, I had a perspective on technology and social media, and started talking with my kids about it pretty early on. So I now have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old. My 12-year-old does not have a phone. She's pretty proud of that. And my 14-year-old does have a phone, but she has no social media. I do allow her, she rides horses, I do allow her to use my Instagram to create stories about her horse and stories about our dog. But that's about all that I allow her to do. And when we do that, it's obviously on my phone, on my account, and we talk about it, and I introduce ideas that are important about management and regulation through that process.
I go back to those days as well and help to be involved with the establishment of some of these early internet technologies and stuff. My kids are a little older. My youngest just turned 18, and I have a 25-year-old. But I was not as smart and well-educated as you back in those days. So my kids started with phones pretty early for different reasons. My daughter, both my kids probably before they were 10. My daughter, it was sort of the early days, so she didn't have people to go back and forth with, and so she's turned out to be pretty balanced in her use of social media and phones and stuff. My son, who sort of grew up in the mainstream thick of that and through COVID and all that, is definitely sort of a perpetual scroller, and I think if I had to do it over, I would probably do it differently.
I've got three kids, 2, 6, and 9, and they've been really lucky to be able to play with their Yoto player and have an almost endless supply of high-quality audio for, well, my daughter's 9, and she's been using her Yoto player since before she was 2. We're pretty liberal with things like TV. We're trying to hold off on phones, but every family's different, right?
I'm going to use your technologies for my grandkids.
I'm curious, and we could start with maybe you, Lauren, but everyone, obviously, this probably applies to everybody here. So, kids can benefit from technology, and tech skills are important for navigating the world, but there's this balance. And so how should parents think about introducing tech and the internet to their kids?
Well, tech is definitely here to stay. So, and we at Life 360 think that there's a lot of really good positive roles that tech can play. So, for example, Life 360 isn't designed to be used actively on your phone. It's designed so that you can put your phone on your pocket and go out and play ball or go to the store, and your parents can keep an eye on you. So that's just like one example of ways that technology can be really freeing and help kids build independence. But we also believe that there is a time when it's too early. As a business, maybe it'd be great if every kid has a phone, but our recommendation, we really like this, wait till eighth grade to give kids phones. So we're a big fan of sort of holding off on that dedicated phone until you're a little older.
I mean, I think the mistake would be to kind of think that tech and the internet is one blanket thing, right? There's a big difference between, there's so many things you can do on it. And every family is different. It's really understanding, like, what's the motivation behind the thing that I'm interacting with, and if you can understand that, then I think you can make good choices.
Mm-hmm. Jennifer, schools are adopting Yondr pouches to prevent, phone distractions. Have you seen measurable changes in behavior? And also, how do you deal with, like, angry kids, angry parents? I mean, I imagine it's a divisive thing. So how do you navigate that?
So the next generation should really be able to live life untethered and strike a healthy balance between their screens and the world around them. The Yondr's program starts with helping the stakeholders involved, whether we're talking about in environments like education schools, but also courtrooms and companies and comedy venues. We start with the process of defining the policy. And then we go into communication, because communication is key in getting stakeholders to understand the potential real value that would come from being able to create a phone-free experience. And then we get into the rollout and then the pouches. So there's like a lot that builds up to the moment when the students walk in and the phones go in the pouches. And we like to create it as a bell-to-bell, so that it's a full phone-free school day, and that really enables the students to not be distracted in the hallways and in cafeterias. And we've heard from teachers, double digit, like 75% of teachers think this has transformed their classrooms, but also superintendents and principals talk about the hallways, how they actually see the eyes of the students, and that in the cafeterias, kids are eating again, which was a statistic that when I joined, I was shocked by, in that students, when they're fearful that they might be captured,
it changes the way they eat?
Yes, because they're fearful potentially that they're going to be captured on video eating. But when that goes away, they eat. That's like what's supposed to happen, right? And so, yes, leading up, there's a lot of conversation and communication, but then once you go through that experience for a couple of weeks, you notice the chatter, the eating, the eye connection, and the anxiety levels go down, and the behavior issues go down. I'm new still, so I don't have all the stats, but I can tell you that I've memorized the cafeteria piece, and also the fact that the behavior issues on average go down about 43%.
Behavior issues meaning like disciplinary?
Bullying,
yeah.
Being suspended, being referred to for emotional support.
What's so appealing to me about programs like that is it's really hard as a parent to make the right decisions. And there's all this pressure from your kids who come and say, everybody else at school does this, and I don't want to be the only kid. I'm going to be a loser. But when a school implements a program like that, like in society, we have these guidelines. You can't drive until you're 16. You can't,
Right.
vote till you're 18. You can't drink till you're 21.
It becomes about the community.
Yeah,
right? Everybody's
it
experiencing
releases that pressure, and it lets parents make better decisions than I made.
Tom, do you get feedback? I mean, your users are very small, but the feedback you get from parents, how does that, like, what does that look like, and how does that sort of play into the design, the UX?
Yeah, I mean, we're very lucky to have a very engaged audience, and we hear from our parents a lot. It's a really valuable thing, and we really kind of take that on board with everything we do, with the product development, the user experience. So for kids, I think it's really inspiring when we hear from them about when they've perhaps fallen in love with a story or a piece of music for the first time. And that's something that's like really powerful at any age, but especially when you're young and perhaps it's happening for the first time. That's amazing to hear. And then parents often tell us that because their kids are in control, that actually gives them a bit of independence back, and not in a kind of neglectful way, but in a way that's like, okay, I'm able to delegate these decisions to you. I'm not constantly having to drive the bus and make choices for you about what you're listening to or what you're watching. And because they're able to delegate that responsibility, that important life skill that I think kids learn with Yoto, everyone's a winner, because kids get a great experience and parents get a bit of independence too.
I love this theme. This is really important to Life 360 as well. The theme of like, how do you put out the right guardrails so that you can give your kids more independence? It's not about controlling them. It's really about freeing them, but in a safe way.
Yeah, giving them space to explore.
And it's also not about being anti-technology.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
really about balance and teaching good habits and new rituals.
Yeah, tech for good.
What are the sort of resources or guides? I'm sure, I think we talked about this earlier, everyone here has read The Anxious Generation, but like, what are the other, as parents and people who make products, designed for engaged children, like, where do parents go to figure out this stuff, like the sort of best practices, best approaches?
Yeah.
We could start with you.
I think that other parents, are a great resource, and I know a lot of Life 360 has grown through word of mouth and just through communities, and there's online communities and offline communities. We also find that there's a lot of kids learning what other households do and then telling their parents what to do. And so talking with your kids about what's going on in their friends' households and making it a joint conversation. Parents aren't alone in this journey, and kids can be part of that.
And do you find a meaningful difference between, maybe it's too early to say, I don't know, but Gen Z and Gen Alpha? Like, are the patterns changing? You want to take that?
I've definitely noticed a pattern change. The question you asked earlier, you got an answer which is like an age range. And I think that's an easy place for parents to start. When, my 12-year-olds friends, their families, they would just come up to me and say 18, 14, just start throwing numbers around. And that's my 12-year-old who doesn't have a phone and doesn't have social media. They still talk on text and they still Zoom, and that's awesome. But I think to your question, about resources, Yondr works really closely with all of our partners, including when they're comedy shows or venues, to really create the support network necessary. But I would say, me as a parent, the fact that I chose to give my kid a phone because she was trick-or-treating in Los Angeles really bothers me today, because what it tells me is that I didn't trust her to make good choices that I'd already taught her, look for cars, don't, be aware of people around you. And so now, within the context of me learning about Yondr and the work that we're doing, I also think it's really important that we enable the communities, the teachers, the superintendents to do the work that they're supposed to do, that they're educated to do and trained to do, and obviously get ongoing support and resources to help them navigate new contexts. So I think the teachers and the school community is a great resource.
Are there sort of gaps in cooperation that you're seeing when it comes to adoption or anything like that? Are there you talk about teachers and I guess policymakers to some extent, is there more, or I guess another way of phrasing it, is there another industry, like nutrition labeling, automotive safety, that's taken a good approach that might be a helpful model?
I don't know. I mean, blockers to collaboration may be the difficulty with discourse in general, and how everyone has a tendency to talk past each other, and I think, that's a big issue. And I think if we can get better at understanding that there are differences, and it's not all about one thing or the other, regulation or free speech or whatever it is, I think that can only be an improvement.
And what about AI? I mean, that is obviously the buzzword of the
Yeah.
conference, but how is that going to shape the way
Yeah.
you think about,
Yeah.
like not monitoring, but
Yeah.
sort of helping these?
It's changing everything, and I think it's as somebody who comes from an older generation, I think it's hard for me to guess how it's going to change. But I already see as kids are learning. My kids are a little bit older, and so they learn to write without AI. And now I'm trying to decide if that's an advantage to them because they actually learn to write, or it's a disadvantage because they're not used to taking advantage of these tools. And you see sort of younger kids who are used to it's not about having AI do it for you, but it's about really, dialoguing with it and probing it for questions. And I think the Gen Alpha is learning that natively to cooperate with this really smart intelligence that knows all these things and can be a really good learning partner. So I think exciting things will come. It's a little hard for me to predict what that's going to be like.
Yeah, I mean, very exciting. It's obviously going to change the world, but how? I think we're going to all have to work really hard to make sure there aren't too many unintended consequences. I think in the context of Yoto, the biggest thing might be that it just continues to reduce the barrier that it takes to create content. So it just becomes easier and easier to make content. And the risk there, I think, is that you end up with just this wash of stuff, and it becomes even more overwhelming and even more difficult to kind of see what's real.
Yeah.
So I think like our approach is going to be always trying to make sure that it's letting you do something that you couldn't do before, rather than just do more stuff, do more of what you're doing.
Yeah, the potential to increase creativity is like huge, but the risk that it'll kill creativity is also really real.
Yeah, exactly.
We were talking backstage about the founder of Yondr had a chat with Kara Swisher, and Kara, in that conversation, coined this idea, and Graham too, of turning our kids into information retrieval machines, and that's not really what we want to raise our kids to be, information retrieval machines, but really to have the ability to think critically and operate and navigate in the world. And so I think AI is something that we have to be really cautious about in exposing our kids to it in any context. I mean, obviously, it's integrated into the social media platforms that we're talking about needing to regulate. So going directly into that world, I think, is it needs a lot of thought and management.
Yeah.
How do you? I'm curious for everyone here. How do you approach sort of teaching digital responsibility to your kids? Like, is there, I mean, AI is going to make it harder, obviously, but how do you sort of, without completely restricting things, like how do you teach about responsible use, guardrails? I mean, it's becoming harder and harder to do, I would think.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is having a conversation. And another part is like a little bit about what the goal is. Like if your kids believe that what you want from them is to get an A, then they're going to do the behaviors like having AI write their papers that result in getting that A. But if you emphasize that, the work and the learning, those are the things that are valuable and the end result isn't the main goal, there's a lot of potential to use this new technology. I mean, AI is actually a great tutor. My son was studying for AP tests, and he got stuck on some question, and you can actually dialogue with AI, and it can explain things better than your teacher can, and that's a great use. Mm-hmm. So I think if you help them understand that the knowledge is what's important, the learning, the understanding, and not the end grade and not goal seek, it really helps.
I think it's about critical thinking, like understanding where something's coming from, what are the motivations of the source, kind of history 101, right? Who is this person, and what do they want me to take from this thing that I'm seeing? And that's tough sometimes, but I think if we can instill that critical thinking in kids from a young age, then they're going to be more attuned. And actually, like, kids are pretty smart, and my kids talk to me about climate change way more than I bring up the conversation. So if we can just instill that critical thinking and that education from early on, they're pretty smart. They get it.
They are very smart, but we also have to acknowledge that kids' brains are developing, and the neural pathways that we are allowing them to create, we have to consider how to sort of undo some of those. Graham likes to talk about the fact that when you put your phone in a Yondr pouch, you still have it with you. And for the first couple of hours, a kid can start to have like a sense of like, oh, is it vibrating? Is something happening? And then when they go to touch their phone, they're actually not touching their phone, they're touching the pouch. And that creates a physical stimulant that like starts to rewire the ritual. And so yes, we have to talk, and we have to consider guardrails, but we also have to use language like we say phone-free spaces. We don't say phone bans. And I'm not a huge fan of guardrails because when we say things like that, it makes it feel like there's something really important in here that you can't get access to. But like there's something really important in the real world. And we have to sort of shift that idea that what's happening around you in the context of the real world with real people is a playground in and of itself, more so than the digital world.
Yeah. I love that idea that it's not just about what they're not doing on their phone, it's about what they are doing in physical space. My kid plays a game called Magic the Gathering, which is like a card game, and you interact with real humans, and there's all sorts of those, pickleball and all sorts of other real world activities, and it's getting them into those things.
And having them be joyful and create a sense of expectation and anticipation for something really fun that isn't in a phone.
Yeah, yeah.
I know Australia implemented a social media ban, right, for kids under 16 kind of recently. So I'm curious, are there other states, countries, entities that are sort of doing models that you think are interesting or worth emulating in some way?
Yeah, I don't know where the policies are. I'm not an expert in the policies.
Sure, yeah.
But I think it's an interesting, it'll be interesting to watch, and certainly it aligns with our recommendation around when kids should use phones. But I'm not sure if making that decision, a government policy, it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. One thing I think that governments can do is really push on media companies to tune their algorithms to be less addictive. We all know that social media is designed to be addictive, but it doesn't have to be. And, it could be a lot less binary, should they use it or should they not, or how can it be designed so that, it really runs out of interesting stuff after 45 minutes of use. Like that you could design for that. Why don't we? Why don't we have that conversation?
Yeah, and there's a smartphone is a smartphone because it can do thousands of things, right? And there's a massive difference between knowing where my kid is on the way home from school and doom scrolling through an algorithmic feed late at night in the bedroom. It's understanding the difference between those two. It's not black and white.
So in the 3 weeks that I've been with Yondr, there have been announcements almost intra-daily of states and local governments releasing funds and making policies. So Yondr's now in all 50 states and 35 countries, and 2 million students are working with the Yondr program. And in the last year, that was a 300% year-over-year growth. And it's really following a lot of the attention that communities are sort of starting to embrace through government policy, local government policy.
Tom, this one, I think everybody can answer, but I'm especially interested in you because of the product itself, the sort of box. Like, can you just talk a little bit about the design and like how there is a really tiny screen, right? But it like displays cool little.
We call it a display.
It's display, yeah, with cool little like kind of cartoony graphics. But it's other than that, it's totally analog. So, but how do you approach design differently? How do you design a product to compete with an iPhone and an iPad? Was that something I imagine you're very conscious of? Yeah. Yeah,
sure. So, when we launched our first Kickstarter product back in 2017, we wrote a manifesto, and one of the points in that is that we wanted to build this product for kids from the ground up. Thank you very much. It was like my hand needed that in it. And we wanted it to be engaging but not addictive. And so we don't think that kids have to be glued to their Yoto players 24 hours a day, although sometimes it feels like that way when my kids are kind of fallen in love with, at the moment it's Harry Potter. And so what we do is we prioritize a deeper sense of engagement. So our North Star metric, the metric that defines the direction of our company for everybody, is weekly active families. So if you use a Yoto player for more than 5 minutes cumulatively in any 1 week, that's an active family. So we don't use something like total listening time, which would drive a more linear approach to engagement. And then practically that means that we avoid things like notifications or things that appear like notifications or kind of never-ending experience cycles, things like feeds. And we just prioritize being there in the family throughout the day for whatever the family needs, whether that's a podcast to listen to at breakfast in the morning or a white noise at the touch of a button for nap time in the middle of the day, or a yoga card in the afternoon, or a calming story at bedtime. And we try and be a partner for families and be there for the long term.
Life 360 is similar in that we're designed to get you off and doing. So we designed to let you see where your family is and be done really, really quickly and make sure that nothing gets in the way of that. So
it's like an interesting equilibrium to achieve. This idea of engaging but not addictive. I'm curious how you think about that, or how you achieve that.
I think the phone-free experience is critical to supporting an ethos of being present, right? I mean, this is what you're talking about in the podcast in the morning and family activities and engagement. I think it starts with taking that action in sort of creating the phone-free moment, the space to be able to have a vantage point that goes beyond what we're sort of tethered to when we're looking in the screen.
And I think also it's just about, like, we do surveys with our families, and we've had surveys where 90% of respondents have cited advertising as the kind of number one concern that they've got. And so I think what we try and do is create something, a product, an experience that you have to pay for, right? You have to pay for this and pay for the cards. But we try and create this value that gives back enough. So we're not kind of driving for that never-ending engagement, but we just want to be there and be there for the long term.
I think we've just got a minute left here, really, but I think it would be appropriate to end on, maybe for each of you, one piece of advice on parenting with technology, or just parenting. But I would think, any kind of guidance or advice. We could start. Yeah, sure. Let's start.
Okay. So I was in Anaheim, and I got to see a really powerful superintendent leader with a school in Fresno, and he had this moment to speak, and it was like 15 slides, 1 second per slide, no more than 5 minutes. It was like a Def Poetry Jam moment, and it brought me to tears. I was so moved by him. He is the only school in Fresno who has gone phone-free. And his entire presentation was about the fact that it wasn't him, it was his teachers in his community, and he was responsible for leading them there. He was being brave, and he literally sat through environments where he felt like he was being crucified, and his family was there, and they were like protecting him like the Secret Service in these moments. So I'd say, like, take action, be brave, be a leader for your family, be a leader for your community.
I mean, maybe just acknowledging that every family is different, right? And every family is different. I had something else I was going to say, but it was really good as well. So sorry about that.
maybe you'll think of it while I'm talking. I would just say, give yourself some grace. You're not going to get it all right as a parent, and
that was
your
it,
kids
actually.
will probably your kids will be okay, and it's good for them to know they're not going to get it all right, and to know that parents make mistakes, and that's part of the process. It's part of learning to grow, and maybe one of the most important things you can offer is to be wrong sometimes and be okay with it.
I think that's all the time we have. Can we get a round of applause for our panelists? Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
And stick around. We've got more good panels coming up. Thanks.